They buried my life's work in dirt, 6,000 tons of it, and then they tried to send me the bill. I said that out loud the first time I walked up to the pit and saw flat ground where there should have been a wall of blue stone like someone had taken a giant eraser to 14 years of sweat, and then mailed me an invoice for the eraser. My name is Caleb Mercer. I'm 54, a licensed blasting contractor, third-generation stone man, which mostly means I know how rock breaks, how contracts read, and how to keep my hands clean enough to eat with after a long shift. If you want the short version, I own an 8-acre limestone quarry 20 minutes outside a town called Blackage. Not a junked-out hole with a sagging fence, a permitted, inspected, bonded commercial site. I chased a thin vein of blue limestone through that hill for over a decade, bench by bench, paying for every inch with diesel, late nights, and loan payments that read like a horror story. That blue stuff architectural grade pulls about $360 a ton when the market's decent. It ends up in courthouse steps, fireplaces, the fancy outdoor kitchen everybody posts photos of. I didn't inherit that seam. My granddad sold a pasture to buy the mineral rights back in the 60s. I earned the rest. Last spring, I took a 5-week highway job up in Kentucky. Good money, union scale, a chance to square some bills. Before I left, I did what I always do, locked the gate, checked pumps, tarped exposed seams against the rains. I figured the quarry would be the quarry when I got back. Turns out I was naive in a neighborhood way. When I pulled in late May, the first thing I noticed was the dust, red-brown clay dust, hanging like somebody had been tearing up farmland. I slowed, rolled down the window, and my stomach dropped. Where there should have been a 40-foot drop into terraces of cut stone, there was flat ground. Fresh dirt. Lumpy, uneven, the mouth of my pit filled to grade. I got out, boots crunching on gravel that wasn't mine, and for a second I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. There was no edge. There were piles of broken concrete tree stumps, rebar, asphalt chunks, truck after truck of fill, dumped until the hole disappeared. I remember standing there, hands on my hips, laughing the wrong kind of laugh, the kind that happens when your brain refuses to accept the scene. The gate lock had been cut. Tire tracks went off in a dozen directions. Somebody had been busy. I drove straight to the county clerk's office the next morning. If you're in construction long enough, you learn to read paper. Like other folks read faces, there's always a trail. After an hour of flipping permits and records, I found 39 dump tickets over 3 weeks, all listed under West Haven Estates Homeowners Association. West Haven sits on the ridge east of my land, neat lawns, matching mailboxes, flags on porches, the kind of place where decisions get made at potlucks and then rubber-stamped at board meetings. I remembered going to one of their early meetings years back, trying to be neighborly, showing blasting schedules, explaining vibration studies. Most folks nodded. A few complained. I called the number for their management office that afternoon. Doug Harland answered. He had that smooth, measured voice people use when they're used to telling other people what to do. I tried to keep my tone level. Doug, this is Caleb Mercer. I just got back in. You want to explain why half your neighborhood is sitting in my quarry? There was a long, faint exhale. Caleb, he said finally, we've been meaning to speak with you. Your pit has become a serious safety concern. Kids can get down there. Property values. He said all the words you expect. Then the line that made my jaw freeze. We commissioned an environmental review. We were advised the safest course of action was to stabilize the area by filling it in. I asked him to repeat himself. He clarified, we filled it. We did you a favor. That open excavation was a liability. We'll be sending you an invoice for $34,000 to cover the cost of the fill and the assessment. It's only fair. My laugh this time wasn't a joke. Doug, I said low, you just buried about 2,000 tons of blue seam I had under contract. You didn't do me a favor, you picked a fight. He sighed like I was the unreasonable one. The pit is filled, it's done. Sometimes it's best to move on. I hung up and walked the site again slower. Cinder blocks gouged the benches. Clay had worked its way into the fractures. I thought about the masons waiting on deliveries, about deposits I'd already spent. Then came the certified letter from the county zoning board. West Haven had filed a formal complaint alleging I was operating an illegal excavation. I won't pretend I wasn't scared. Not because I thought I'd lose the quarry. I've kept permits current since my father taught me to. I was scared because that complaint was written in a language that could shake the ground under my own name. That night I dug out my mineral deed, the one in the fireproof box behind my old tax returns and my father's pocket watch. My grandfather's signature fountain pen ink, 1963. The deed said plain as day, the subsurface mineral rights to my 8 acres belong to the Mercer family to a depth of 400 feet, with protection from surface interference under Tennessee mining law. It was the kind of sentence you hope you never have to use, and the kind you clutch when someone tries to act like your land is a common good they can rearrange. I drove to Nashville the next day and sat across from a mining attorney named Laura Bennett, sharp eyes, boots under her desk. You could tell she preferred practical work. I slid the deed across the table and told her the story. She listened without interrupting, then whistled. "This isn't a zoning dispute," she said. "This is interference with mineral extraction. If it was willful, the statute allows treble damages." Treble. Triple. I almost smiled. That felt like something from a lawyer movie. But then she slid a printed email across to me, Doug, to the HOA board, dated 3 weeks before the first dump load. "Caleb Mercer will be out of town for a month. This may be our window to resolve the quarry issue decisively." They had planned it. They waited. We filed a formal complaint with the Tennessee Board of Mineral Resources that afternoon. Photos, dump records, permits, vibration reports, emails from earlier meetings where I'd offered extra fencing. 48 hours later, a state inspector named Raymond Cole showed up. Old quarry hands, respect him. His voice sounded like gravel. He dug his boot into the foreign fill, picked up chunks of concrete, took core samples. He said quietly, "This was active." That was the day the story stopped being about neighborhood squabbles and started being about willful interference. The board issued an order. West Haven had 30 days to remove all foreign fill at their expense, or the state would contract the removal and seek full cost recovery and penalties. And then the line that mattered most, the mineral estate holds dominant rights over the surface estate in matters of lawful extraction. In plain English, my rock outranked their lawns. I expected pushback. I didn't expect how confident HOAs become when they deal in paint colors and mailbox heights. They pulled in lawyers, insurance companies, and a lot of public outrage from residents who'd paid top dollar for that neat suburban life. West Haven's legal team argued they believed the quarry inactive. They argued community safety. They argued environmental risk. We produced inspection logs, fencing invoices, security camera footage with timestamps, the stuff that breathes life into legal claims. Every time they shifted, the ground moved under them. Then came the worst news. The core samples showed contamination, clay seeping into fractures, petroleum traces from asphalt drywall, particulate. About 2,400 tons of stone were compromised, architectural grade no more. I did the math in my head, $360 a ton, and then the value lost in contracts, the excavation and restoration costs, the professional assessments, lost time. Laura added up a stack of figures: destroyed limestone, lost contracts, excavation assessments, downtime. Then she reminded me about treble damages if we could prove willfulness. There was an email from Doug that did the heavy lifting at trial. He'd written about waiting for my window out of town. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was intent. The hearing lasted 34 days. I didn't have to be theatrical in court. The documents, the dump tickets, the email, the core sample reports did the speaking. When the judge read the final figure, $6.9 million payable within 90 days, you could feel the breath leave the room. Doug didn't look at me. For a long minute, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, like I'd watched 2 freight trains collide and tried to figure out which one started it. A judgment is paper until money changes hands. The next weeks were a spectacle. At first, the HOA meetings were loud emergency sessions, residents demanding explanations. Then letters went out, a special assessment might be needed, tens of thousands per household if they wanted to satisfy the judgment. People who'd stretched budgets to buy into West Haven started calculating the real cost of an impulsive decision that had been sold as protection. The state contracted removal had already restored my pit to something like what it used to be, but the contaminated seam had been cut out and sold off as road base, the stone I had spent 14 years courting crushed under tires. That hurt. Rock doesn't hold grudges, it just becomes aggregate. But human consequences stuck. West Haven's insurer denied coverage, mining-related claims excluded, intentional acts excluded. Doug's email about our window was the nail in the coffin. By week 11, the board voted to file Chapter 7. The association dissolved, assets liquidated. Doug filed personal bankruptcy 2 weeks later. I heard he lost his house. If you are waiting for me to say I celebrated, I didn't. I'm human. Of course, I felt a quiet human satisfaction when the scales finally tipped, but mostly I felt the weight of what one decision does. A man tries to protect his community and ends up destroying lives. It's messy. The thing that keeps pulling at me, though, is how this all began with fear and assumptions. Were kids wandering near my fence? Probably. Did blasting rattle a window now and then? Sure. Did I want someone getting hurt on my land? Not for a second. There's a difference between raising a legitimate concern and deciding you have the authority to erase someone else's livelihood. Doug wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a man who equated control with safety. He wanted to be decisive. He wanted a problem fixed on his terms. In trying to bury my quarry, he ended up burying his own authority and his neighborhood in legal bills. A year later, we ran the bench's backset charges, worked through nights with floodlights, hauled out the remaining blue seam. We pulled about $2.4 million in clean stone. It covered a lot of losses. I paid off equipment notes. Contracts got fulfilled. One evening at the hardware store, an older couple from West Haven recognized me. The husband cleared his throat, said, "You were within your rights." His wife added quietly, "It got out of hand." That meant more than the money and the judgment ever did. Because here's what sticks: power feels real when it's printed on glossy newsletters, when neighbors sign petitions, when a committee votes. But actual ownership, the kind written in deeds and backed by law, that moves differently. So what did I learn? First, boundaries matter not just on maps, but in conversation. If Doug had called before the first truck rolled, we could have talked. I might have reinforced fencing, added signage, scheduled blasts around kids' schedules. I'm not unreasonable. But he wanted resolution, not compromise. Second, assumptions are dangerous. When a group of people decides they're authorized to redraw someone else's line because they feel threatened, the outcome isn't protection, it's destruction. And lastly, the law exists for a reason. Sometimes it takes a lot of paper to make somebody understand the weight of a decision. I still walk the rim of that quarry most mornings. I run my hand along the fence, check the locks twice, not because I'm afraid, because I'm wiser about what people will do when they let fear dictate action. I think about Doug sometimes. I don't relish his fall. I pity the way his choice rippled through people's lives. But I also understand the satisfaction that comes when justice, slow and cumbersome, finally catches up. So I want to ask you, and be honest here because I read these things, if you lived in that subdivision, would you have supported filling the pit? Would you have trusted the HOA to do the right thing? Or would you have asked the hard questions first? And if you were staring at 6,000 tons of someone else's decision piled on top of your life's work, would you have pushed for every dollar the law allowed or walked away? Drop your thoughts. Tell me where you land on this. People like tidy answers, but life prefers messy ones. This one left a scar in the hillside and a lesson in the ledger, and yeah, in the end, the rock stayed patient. And the truth did what it always does. It showed up slow and stubborn as stone.